Good afternoon. Can I help you?
I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve to stand here. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But before I die,
Rain hammered against the large glass windows of the Carter family mansion as thunder roared across the night sky. 8-year-old Lily Carter sat quietly on the staircase, hugging her teddy bear tightly. She hated storms. Whenever thunder struck, she always ran into her father's arms. But tonight, everything felt different. Her parents had been shouting for almost an hour. Their voices echoed through the entire house. She had never heard her mother cry like this before. Slowly, Lily stood up and walked toward the living room. As she reached the hallway, she froze. Her father, Michael Carter, stood in the middle of the room with a suitcase beside him. Across from him stood her mother, Elizabeth. Her face was wet with tears. In her trembling hand was a photograph. A photograph of Michael kissing another woman. "You lied to me for 2 years," Elizabeth whispered. "You looked into my eyes every single day and lied." Michael didn't deny it. Instead, he sighed impatiently. "I didn't plan for you to find out like this." Elizabeth laughed bitterly. "So you were planning to tell me?" "No, I was planning to leave." Those words shattered what little hope remained in her heart. Lily could no longer hide. "Daddy." The little girl stepped into the room. Both adults turned toward her. Her innocent blue eyes searched her father's face. "Daddy, why is Mommy crying?" Michael looked away. He couldn't answer. Elizabeth quickly wiped away her tears and forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart." But it wasn't okay. Not even close. The front door suddenly opened. High heels clicked across the marble floor. A tall, elegant woman walked inside carrying an expensive handbag. She smiled confidently as if she already belonged there. Her name was Victoria, Michael's mistress. She looked at Elizabeth without the slightest shame. "So, I guess she knows." Elizabeth stared at the woman standing in her home, the home she had helped build. The woman sleeping with her husband had the audacity to walk through the front door. Lily looked from one woman to the other. She didn't understand. "Daddy, who is she?" Michael remained silent. Victoria answered instead. "I'm someone who's going to make your daddy very happy." Elizabeth felt as though someone had punched her in the chest. Lily slowly walked toward her father. She reached for his hand. "Daddy, is she your friend?" Michael looked at his daughter. For a brief second, his expression softened, but only for a moment. He gently removed her hand from his. "Go upstairs, Lily. I need to talk to your mother." Lily shook her head. "No, I don't want Mommy to cry anymore." Victoria rolled her eyes. "This is taking too long." She wrapped her arm around Michael's. "Tell them." Michael closed his eyes for a second, then took a deep breath. "Elizabeth, I'm leaving. I've already packed my things." Elizabeth's lips trembled. "And your daughter?" Michael swallowed hard. "I'll send money every month." Elizabeth stared at him in disbelief. "So that's it? You think being a father is sending a bank transfer?" Lily looked completely confused. "Daddy, are you going on a business trip?" Michael couldn't even look into her eyes. "No, I'm moving." The little girl's face fell. "For how long?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, Victoria smiled. "Forever." Lily's tiny hands tightened around her teddy bear. She slowly walked closer to her father. Tears filled her eyes. "But, you promised we'd go to the zoo tomorrow." Michael looked away. "I can't. You promised we'd build my treehouse. You promised you'd always be my daddy." Elizabeth could no longer hold back her tears. She turned away, unable to watch. Lily hugged her father's leg. "Please don't go. I'll be good. I promise. I won't make noise anymore. I'll clean my room every day. I'll get better grades. I'll do anything. Please, don't leave us." For a moment, the room was silent. Even Victoria looked uncomfortable. Michael slowly bent down. Lily's eyes filled with hope. She thought he was going to hug her. Instead, he gently pulled her arms away from his leg. Then he stood up. He looked directly into his daughter's tear-filled eyes and quietly said the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "From today, Victoria is my family now." Lily froze. She couldn't understand what those words meant. Elizabeth could. She gasped in horror. Michael picked up his suitcase. Victoria smiled triumphantly. Together, they walked toward the front door. Lily ran after him. "Daddy, please." He never turned around. The front door opened. Cold rain blew into the house. Then, the door slammed shut. Lily stood there staring at the closed door, waiting, sure her father would come back. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 30. He never returned. That night, An 8-year-old girl sat beside the front door until she fell asleep, still holding her teddy bear. She believed if she waited long enough, her father would remember his promise. But some promises are broken forever. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Let us know your country in the comments. I enjoy seeing how far these stories travel around the world. And if you enjoy emotional family stories about betrayal, forgiveness, and the consequences of our choices, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Now, let's see what happened after the night that changed Lily's life forever. The next morning, the Carter mansion felt strangely empty. The expensive furniture was still there. The crystal chandeliers still sparkled. The luxury cars still sat in the driveway. But to Elizabeth, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a museum filled with memories she wished she could forget. 8-year-old Lily quietly walked into the kitchen. She carried her little teddy bear under one arm. "Daddy forgot to kiss me good morning," she said softly. Elizabeth forced a smile, though her heart was breaking. "Sweetheart, your daddy won't be coming home anymore." Lily tilted her head. For how many days? Elizabeth couldn't answer. Instead, she knelt down and hugged her daughter tightly. For a very long time, Lily remained silent. Children often understand more than adults realize. She simply nodded and whispered, "Okay." But every evening after school, she still sat by the front window, watching every passing car, hoping one of them would be her father's. Weeks turned into months. Months became years. The waiting slowly turned into acceptance. Life became difficult almost immediately. Michael froze every bank account Elizabeth had access to. He stopped paying the mortgage. The expensive mansion that once symbolized their happiness was taken by the bank. Mother and daughter packed what little they could carry into 2 old suitcases. As Elizabeth locked the front door for the last time, Lily looked up at her. "Are we coming back?" Elizabeth swallowed the lump in her throat. "No, sweetheart. This chapter is over." Lily quietly placed her small hand inside her mother's. Then together, they walked away from the only home Lily had ever known. Neither of them looked back. The small apartment they moved into couldn't have been more different. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The heater barely worked during winter. The bedroom was so tiny that Elizabeth and Lily shared the same bed. Every night, Elizabeth worked 2 jobs. She cleaned offices after midnight, then woke before sunrise to work in a neighborhood bakery. She returned home exhausted, but she never complained. Not once. Because every dollar she earned had one purpose: giving Lily a future. One rainy afternoon, Lily came home from school carrying a folded piece of paper. She looked unusually quiet. Elizabeth immediately noticed. "How was school today?" Lily forced a smile. It was okay, but something wasn't right. Later that evening, as Elizabeth packed Lily's lunch for the next day, she found the paper inside her backpack. It was a Father's Day drawing. Every child had drawn a picture of their father, except Lily. Her page was almost completely blank. In one corner, she had drawn a tiny little girl standing alone beneath a tree. At the top of the page, she had written just one sentence: "I hope my daddy remembers me someday." Elizabeth's hands began shaking. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She carefully folded the paper and placed it back into the bag. She didn't want Lily to know she had seen it. The years passed. Lily grew into a remarkable young woman. She worked hard, studied harder. She earned scholarships, graduated at the top of her class. While many students spent weekends partying, Lily spent hers working at a local bookstore to help her mother pay bills. One evening, as they ate a simple dinner together, Elizabeth looked across the table at her daughter. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you the life you deserved." Lily reached across the table and gently held her mother's hand. "You gave me something better." Elizabeth frowned. "What?" "You stayed." Those 2 words hit Elizabeth harder than anything she had ever heard. She looked away, wiping tears from her eyes. Lily smiled gently. "You never chose someone else. You chose me." The tiny apartment suddenly felt warmer. Not because they had more money, but because they had something Michael had thrown away years ago: each other. Meanwhile, across town, Michael Carter was living the life he had once dreamed of. A larger mansion, luxury vacations, private yachts, magazine covers, business awards. Victoria got everything she wanted: designer handbags, sports cars, jewelry worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. To the outside world, Michael looked like the definition of success. Whenever reporters asked if he regretted anything, he always smiled. "I've never made better decisions." But life has a strange way of keeping score. And sometimes, the bill doesn't arrive until years later. One autumn morning, Michael walked into the headquarters of Carter Holdings expecting another successful board meeting. Instead, he found every board member sitting in complete silence. No one smiled. No one stood to greet him. His chief financial officer slowly slid a thick folder across the table. Michael frowned. "What is this?" The CFO looked him straight in the eye. "It's everything we've been trying to hide." Michael opened the folder. His confident smile slowly disappeared. The company wasn't just struggling. It was bleeding millions of dollars every single week. Several major investors had quietly withdrawn. Banks were demanding immediate repayment of massive loans. And one document near the bottom made his hands go cold. Final notice of insolvency. For the first time in 20 years, Michael felt fear. Real fear. He looked around the room. "What do we do?" No one answered. Because for the first time in his life, the man who had always believed money could solve every problem had run out of both. Michael sat frozen in the boardroom, staring at the financial reports spread across the polished oak table. Numbers had never frightened him before, but today, they looked like a death sentence. His chief financial officer broke the silence. "We've lost 3 of our biggest investors." Michael looked up. "Why?" "They've lost confidence." Michael slammed his hand on the table. "They've been with me for 15 years. The CFO nodded slowly. "They were. But they believe Carter Holdings is no longer stable." Michael pushed the papers away in frustration. "This is temporary. We'll recover." No one around the table responded. Their silence spoke louder than words. That evening, Michael returned to his mansion expecting comfort. Instead, he walked into another argument. Victoria was standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by dozens of expensive shopping bags. The moment she saw him, she frowned. "You look awful." Michael loosened his tie. "I've had a long day." Victoria crossed her arms. "So have I." Michael looked confused. "What happened?" She held up a glossy fashion magazine. "The charity gala is next month. So every woman there will be wearing the newest diamond A-Poke collection." Michael shrugged. "Then buy it." "I already tried." She smiled impatiently. "They're only $600,000. Michael stared at her. $600,000 for jewelry? Victoria rolled her eyes. "Don't start acting poor." For the first time in years, Michael didn't laugh. Instead, he quietly said, "We need to cut back." The room became silent. Victoria blinked. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" Michael walked toward the window. "The company is facing challenges. We need to be careful." Victoria laughed. She honestly thought he was joking. "You own half the city. You'll be fine." Michael didn't answer, because for the first time, he wasn't sure that was true. Meanwhile, across town, life looked very different for Lily and Elizabeth. Every Sunday afternoon, they shared lunch together at the same small neighborhood cafe. It wasn't fancy. The tables were old. The chairs squeaked. But they loved it. As they ate, Elizabeth smiled proudly. "You've been promoted again?" Lily nodded. "I'll be managing the entire community outreach department." Elizabeth reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I always knew you'd do something meaningful." Lily smiled. "I learned from the strongest woman I know." Elizabeth laughed softly. "I don't know about that." "Oh, I do." Lily looked into her mother's eyes. "You worked 2 jobs. You never complained. You made every birthday feel special even when we couldn't afford presents. You taught me that love isn't measured by money." Elizabeth looked away, trying to hide the tears gathering in her eyes. "You've always made me proud." Just then, a little boy at the next table accidentally dropped his ice cream. He immediately burst into tears. Without thinking, Lily stood up. She knelt beside him. "It's okay." She smiled warmly. "I think accidents deserve second chances." She bought him another ice cream. The little boy hugged her tightly. His mother smiled. "Thank you." Lily simply shrugged. "My mom taught me kindness costs nothing." Elizabeth watched quietly. In that moment, she realized something. Michael had walked away from the greatest gift life had ever given him. Weeks passed. The financial crisis deepened. Banks froze Carter Holdings' credit lines. Construction projects stopped. Employees began resigning. News headlines grew more alarming each day. Carter Holdings faces record losses. Is the billionaire empire about to collapse? Investors demand answers. Michael stopped sleeping. Every night, he sat alone in his office until sunrise. Victoria rarely saw him anymore. And when she did, She wasn't interested in comforting him. She was interested in protecting herself. One evening, she walked into his office carrying a folder. "I need you to sign these." Michael barely looked up. "What are they?" "Property transfers." He frowned. "What property?" "The beach house. The penthouse. The villa in Aspen." Michael stared at her. "Why would I transfer them to your name?" Victoria smiled sweetly. "Because we're engaged." Michael slowly closed the folder. "No." Her smile disappeared. "What?" I said no. For the first time since they had met, Victoria saw something she had never expected. Michael wasn't saying yes. She stood up abruptly. "You've changed." Michael laughed bitterly. "No. I've finally opened my eyes." Victoria slammed her handbag onto the desk. "I stood beside you for 20 years. Michael looked at her quietly. "No. You stood beside my money." Silence filled the room. Then, Victoria smiled. Not a warm smile. A cold one. "You'll regret saying that." She turned and walked away. Michael watched her leave. A strange feeling settled over him. It reminded him of another night. 20 years earlier, another woman had stood in front of him with tears in her eyes. Another door had closed. Another family had been broken. Only now, for the first time, he wondered what Elizabeth had felt that night. He whispered to himself, "I deserve this." The next morning, Michael arrived at company headquarters. The receptionist looked at him nervously. "Sir, there are federal investigators waiting for you upstairs." Michael frowned. "Investigators?" She nodded. "They've been here since 6 o'clock." As the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, he saw men in dark suits carrying boxes filled with company documents. Employees stood silently in the hallways. No one looked him in the eye. One investigator approached. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes. We need to ask you a few questions regarding financial misconduct committed by members of your executive team." Michael's face turned pale. "Financial misconduct?" The investigator handed him a thick file. "We believe someone close to you has been stealing from the company for years." Michael opened the first page. His heart nearly stopped. The name at the top read, Victoria Reynolds. For the first time in his life, Michael Carter sat alone. Not in the boardroom where executives once waited for his every command. Not inside the luxury office that overlooked the city skyline. Just alone. The silence inside the mansion was almost unbearable. The same house that had once been filled with laughter, business partners, extravagant parties, and endless celebrations now echoed with emptiness. Michael slowly walked into the dining room. The massive 12-seat dining table stood exactly as it had for years. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and looked around. 12 chairs. Only one occupied. He suddenly remembered another dining table. Much smaller. Much older. Elizabeth serving homemade spaghetti. Little Lily giggling because she had accidentally spilled orange juice on the floor. He remembered pretending to be angry, then lifting her into his arms until she laughed so hard she could barely breathe. For the first time in 20 years. Michael smiled. Then, the smile disappeared. He realized he couldn't remember the sound of Lily's voice anymore. He could remember her laughter. He could remember her tiny footsteps running through the hallway. But her voice, it had faded. That realization hurt more than losing millions of dollars. 3 weeks later, the investigation into Carter Holdings dominated every news channel. Television reporters stood outside the company headquarters. Business analysts predicted bankruptcy. Investors demanded answers. Every newspaper carried the same headline, Empire on the Brink. Michael no longer recognized his own life. His phone barely rang anymore. The same politicians who once begged for his donations suddenly stopped returning his calls. Business partners disappeared. Friends became strangers. The invitations stopped. The compliments stopped. Even the people who once called him family vanished without a goodbye. One evening, Michael picked up his phone. He scrolled through hundreds of contacts. Executives, celebrities, politicians, athletes, powerful people. He called one after another. Most didn't answer. The few who did had the same response. "I'm sorry, Michael. I can't get involved." When the last call ended, he slowly lowered the phone. Then he whispered to himself, "So this is what loneliness feels like." Meanwhile, life had continued beautifully for Lily. At 30 years old, she had become exactly the kind of woman her mother had prayed she would be. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy beyond imagination. But she was respected. She had dedicated her life to helping children who had grown up without stable families. Every weekend, she volunteered at a local family support center. She believed no child should ever feel abandoned. One Saturday morning, a little girl sat alone in the corner of the center, hugging an old stuffed rabbit. She refused to speak. Lily quietly walked over and sat beside her. Neither of them said anything for several minutes. Finally, the little girl whispered, "My daddy said he doesn't love us anymore." Lily's heart tightened. She knew those words, not because she had heard them, because she had lived them. She gently smiled. "You know something?" The little girl looked up. "My dad left when I was about your age." The child's eyes widened. "Really?" Lily nodded. "For a long time, I thought it was because something was wrong with me." She paused. "But one day, my mom told me something I'll never forget." The little girl waited quietly. Lily smiled. She said, "A person who walks away from love isn't proving you're unlovable. They're proving they don't understand what love is." The little girl slowly smiled for the first time that day. Without saying another word, she wrapped her little arms around Lily. Elizabeth watched the moment from across the room. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered softly, "You turned your pain into someone else's healing." That evening, mother and daughter sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. Elizabeth looked unusually thoughtful. "Lily, can I ask you something?" "Of course. If your father ever came back, would you forgive him?" Lily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched the sun slowly disappear beyond the horizon. Finally, she spoke. "I forgave him years ago." Elizabeth looked surprised. "You did?" Lily nodded. "I forgave him because I didn't want to carry bitterness for the rest of my life." Elizabeth smiled proudly. "But forgiveness," Lily continued quietly, "doesn't always mean reconciliation." Elizabeth remained silent. Lily looked at her mother. "I can wish him peace, without giving him a place in my life." Those words stayed with Elizabeth long after the conversation ended. Across town, Michael sat inside a lawyer's office. The lawyer placed another document in front of him. Michael barely had the energy to look at it. "What now?" The lawyer sighed heavily. "The bank has approved the foreclosure." Michael closed his eyes. "The mansion?" The lawyer nodded. "You have 30 days." Michael looked around the office as if hoping someone would tell him it was all a nightmare. But no one spoke. The lawyer quietly gathered the remaining papers. As Michael stood to leave, the lawyer said gently, "Mr. Carter." Michael turned. "I've worked with wealthy families for over 30 years. Michael waited. "I've noticed something." "What?" "The people who lose money usually recover." Michael frowned. "But the people who lose their families, they rarely do." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Michael simply nodded, then walked away. That night, Michael wandered through the empty mansion one last time. He entered Lily's old bedroom. Nothing had changed. The faded wallpaper was still there. The small bookshelf still stood beside the window. In the corner, he noticed a dusty pink box. Curious, he picked it up. Inside were dozens of crayon drawings. Most showed the same thing. A little girl holding hands with her mother and her father. One drawing caught his attention. Across the top, in uneven handwriting, Lily had written, "My daddy is my hero." The date in the corner stopped him cold. It had been drawn the day before he left. Michael's hands began to shake. He sat on the floor, holding the drawing against his chest. For the first time in 20 years, the proud billionaire, the fearless businessman, the man who believed tears were a sign of weakness, broke down completely. He sobbed like a father who had finally understood what he had thrown away. Not money, not success. His little girl, the one who had once believed. He was her hero. Michael cried until there were no tears left. Then, through the silence, he whispered one sentence that no one else could hear. "I don't know where you are anymore, Lily. But if God gives me one more chance, I won't waste it." 30 days later, the mansion was no longer Michael Carter's. The marble floors, the grand staircase, the expensive artwork, even the luxury cars that once filled the driveway, were gone. As the movers loaded the last of his belongings into a small rented truck, Michael stood silently on the front lawn. This was the same house he had once believed would remain in his family for generations. Now, it belonged to strangers. One of the movers approached him. "Mr. Carter, we're finished." Michael nodded quietly. He took one final look at the mansion, then whispered, "I traded my family for this house. And now I have neither." Without another word, he climbed into an old taxi. For the first time in over 20 years, Michael Carter didn't know where he truly belonged. The following morning, Michael visited the small apartment where Elizabeth and Lily had lived after leaving the mansion. He had found the address in an old file hidden among forgotten documents. His hands trembled as he knocked on the faded blue door. An elderly woman opened it. She looked at him carefully. "Can I help you?" Michael cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Elizabeth Carter." The woman sighed. "Oh, you must be very late." Michael frowned. "What do you mean? They moved from here almost 15 years ago." His heart sank. "Do you know where they went?" The woman shook her head. "I only know the little girl grew into a wonderful young lady." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. "You remember Lily?" The old woman smiled warmly. "How could I forget? Every Saturday, she helped me carry groceries upstairs. Every Christmas, she brought me homemade cookies. She was one of the kindest children I've ever met." Michael lowered his head. The woman looked at him more closely. "Were you a relative?" For a moment, Michael couldn't answer. Finally, he whispered, "I'm her father." The old woman's smile disappeared. Silence filled the hallway. After several long seconds, she spoke quietly. "I remember another thing." Michael looked up. "Every birthday, that little girl sat by this window, waiting for you." His eyes filled with tears. "She waited until sunset. Every year. She believed you'd come." Michael leaned against the wall. His legs suddenly felt weak. The old woman continued. "One year, she stopped waiting." Those words pierced his heart more deeply than any insult ever could. Because they were true. Michael spent the next several weeks searching. He visited old schools, church records, neighborhoods where Elizabeth had once worked. He followed every lead he could find. Some ended in disappointment. Others led nowhere. Still, he refused to give up. For the first time in his life, success wasn't measured by money. It was measured by hope. One rainy afternoon, Michael stopped at a small diner along the highway. He ordered nothing more than a cup of coffee. As he stared absent-mindedly through the rain-covered window, two elderly men sat in the next booth. One of them unfolded the local newspaper. The front page featured a photograph of a smiling young woman surrounded by children. The headline read, "Community Leader Receives National Award for Supporting Children from Broken Homes." Michael wasn't paying attention until he heard one of the men speak. "This young woman is remarkable. They say she was raised by a single mother after her father abandoned the family." Michael slowly turned his head. The newspaper slipped slightly. For one brief moment, he saw the photograph. His coffee cup slipped from his hand. It shattered against the floor. His entire body froze. The woman in the photograph had Elizabeth's smile, his own eyes, and the same tiny birthmark near her left eyebrow that Lily had carried since the day she was born. His breathing became uneven. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." With trembling hands, he picked up the newspaper. He stared at the smiling face. 20 years had changed her. The little girl with the teddy bear was gone. Standing before him in the photograph was a confident, compassionate woman. The caption beneath the image read, "Lily Carter, Director of the Hope Family Foundation." Michael traced her face with his shaking fingers. "My little girl." The waitress approached carefully. "Sir, are you all right?" Michael couldn't answer. Tears rolled down his cheeks. For the first time in 20 years, he knew where his daughter was. Across town, Lily had just finished speaking at a family conference. The audience rose to their feet in applause. Parents, teachers, counselors, social workers. Everyone stood. One reporter raised her hand. "Miss Carter, if you could give one message to parents today, what would it be?" Lily smiled thoughtfully, then answered with calm conviction. "Children may not remember every toy you bought them. They may not remember every birthday party, but they will always remember whether you chose them." The audience fell silent. Then, the applause became even louder. Lily stepped away from the microphone. She had no idea that only a few miles away, the man who had once failed to choose her was holding her photograph with trembling hands. And for the first time in 20 years, he was preparing to knock on her door. The address was written on a small piece of paper. Michael had checked it at least 20 times during the drive. His hands trembled as he pulled into the quiet neighborhood. There were no towering mansions, no private gates, no luxury cars parked outside, just tree-lined streets, children riding bicycles, neighbors chatting on their porches. It was peaceful, the kind of neighborhood where families still had dinner together. Michael looked at the modest two-story brick house in front of him. Flowers bloomed along the walkway. Wind chimes danced gently on the front porch. A wooden sign beside the door read, "Home is where love lives." Those words hit him harder than he expected. Love. The very thing he had walked away from 20 years earlier. He sat inside the car for nearly 10 minutes. Twice, he reached for the door handle. Twice, he stopped. What if she refuses to see me? What if she hates me? What if I'm too late? Finally, he whispered a short prayer. God, I don't deserve another chance. But if you can soften her heart enough to hear me, I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to make things right. He stepped out of the car. Every step toward the front door felt heavier than the last. When he finally reached it, he raised his trembling hand. Knock, knock, knock. Silence. A few seconds later, the door slowly opened. Standing before him was a woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile. She wore simple jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair loosely tied back. She looked nothing like the frightened little girl he had abandoned. But somehow, she looked exactly like her. Michael's heart almost stopped. His little girl had become an incredible woman. Lily smiled politely. Good afternoon. Can I help you? Michael opened his mouth. No words came out. His eyes filled with tears. Lily noticed immediately. Sir, are you all right? He looked at her for several long seconds before finally speaking. I'm sorry. Lily looked confused. I'm sorry. Michael nodded. More sorry than you'll ever know. Before Lily could respond, another voice came from inside the house. Honey, who's at the door? A man in his early 30s walked into the hallway carrying a little girl on his shoulders. The little girl couldn't have been older than 6. She giggled as she held onto her father's head. Daddy, you're too tall. The man laughed. I'll try shrinking tomorrow. Michael watched the scene silently. His heart broke. This was the life he should have helped build. Lily smiled warmly. My husband, David. David extended his hand. Hello. Michael shook it weakly. Nice to meet you. The little girl looked curiously at Michael. She smiled the same innocent smile Lily once had. Hi. My name is Grace. Michael smiled through his tears. That's a beautiful name. Grace tilted her head. Why are you crying? The innocent question pierced his heart. He couldn't answer. Lily gently placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. Sweetheart, why don't you and Daddy finish decorating the cookies in the kitchen? Grace nodded happily. Okay. David sensed there was something unusual about the visitor. He gave Lily a reassuring glance before carrying Grace back inside. As the door closed behind them, the porch became quiet once again. Lily looked back at Michael. You said you were sorry. Do we know each other? Michael slowly reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out an old photograph. Its edges were worn from years of being folded and unfolded. He handed it to her. Lily looked down. It was a family picture, a younger version of herself, standing between her mother and father. Her breath caught. She looked up slowly, then back at the photograph, then at the man standing before her. The years had changed him. The gray hair, the tired eyes, the wrinkles. But now, she saw him, the man from her childhood memories. Her father. The photograph slipped from her trembling hands. It floated gently onto the porch. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Finally, Lily whispered, Dad. Michael broke down. He covered his face with both hands. I don't deserve for you to call me that. I lost that right. The day I walked away. Lily stared at him in disbelief. 20 years of unanswered questions. 20 years of wondering. 20 years of imagining this moment. And now, he was standing on her front porch. Older, broken, crying. Michael slowly looked up. I've rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times. I thought if I ever found you, I'd have the perfect words. He shook his head. I don't. So I'll only tell you the truth. I failed you. I failed your mother. I chose pride over love. I chose comfort over my family. And I have regretted that choice every single day. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to speak, but her emotions were fighting each other. The little girl inside her remembered standing in the rain, begging him not to leave. The woman she had become remembered everything her mother had taught her about forgiveness. Michael took one step back. I didn't come here asking for money. I didn't come because I lost my company. I didn't come looking for a place to live. He swallowed hard. I came because before I leave this world, I needed you to know. Not one day passed that I stopped being ashamed of the father I was. Lily closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. She opened them again and asked the one question she had carried since she was 8 years old. Why? Michael's shoulders dropped. He looked toward the sky before answering. Because I was selfish. I kept telling myself I'd come back when the timing was right. Then 1 year became 5. 5 became 10. And before I knew it, I had missed your childhood. His voice cracked. I missed your first day of high school. I missed your graduation. I missed your wedding. I missed becoming a grandfather. He looked through the doorway. Grace's laughter echoed from the kitchen. I missed everything. Lily stood silently. The silence stretched between them. Not empty, but heavy. Finally, she looked him in the eyes and quietly said, I forgave you a long time ago. Hope flickered across Michael's face. But before he could speak, she continued, I forgave you, so I could be free. She paused. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Michael lowered his head. He already knew what was coming. Lily gently picked up the old family photograph from the porch. She placed it back into his hands. Then she said softly, You'll always be the man who gave me life. But my father, she glanced toward the kitchen where David was laughing with Grace, is the man who showed my daughter what staying looks like. Michael closed his eyes. Those words hurt, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Michael stood silently on Lily's front porch. The old family photograph trembled in his hands. He wanted to say something, anything, but no words seemed worthy enough. Lily looked at the man standing before her. He was no longer the confident businessman who had walked away 20 years ago. He looked tired, broken, older than his age. For a brief moment, she saw not the father who had abandoned her, but a man carrying the unbearable weight of his own choices. Michael slowly wiped the tears from his face. I don't expect you to welcome me back. I don't expect you to call me dad. I don't even expect you to forgive me again. He looked down at the faded photograph. I just wanted to tell you something before I leave. Lily remained silent. Michael took a deep breath. I spent 20 years blaming everyone except myself. I blamed the economy. I blamed my business. I blamed the people around me. But every lonely night, I always came back to one memory. The night you held onto my leg, begging me not to leave. His voice broke. I still hear your little voice in my dreams. I don't think it will ever leave me. Lily lowered her eyes. She remembered that night too. She remembered standing in the rain, holding her teddy bear, watching the only man she called her hero walk away without looking back. For years, she had imagined this conversation. She had imagined shouting, demanding answers, making him feel every ounce of pain he had caused. But standing before him now, she realized something. Life already had. His greatest punishment wasn't bankruptcy. It wasn't losing his mansion. It wasn't being abandoned by the woman he had chosen over his family. His greatest punishment was living long enough to understand exactly what he had lost. Lily looked at him with tears in her eyes. My mother used to tell me something. Michael slowly looked up. She said, bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. So I chose to forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply stops the past from controlling my future. Michael nodded slowly. I understand. No, I deserve that. Just then, the front door opened again. Elizabeth stepped onto the porch. Michael froze. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. The years had added silver to her hair, fine lines to her face, but her eyes were still the same. Kind, calm, strong. Neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other. Finally, Elizabeth smiled gently. You've gotten old. Michael laughed through his tears. So have you. I heard you were gone. Elizabeth smiled softly. Rumors travel faster than truth. Michael lowered his head. I'm sorry. She nodded. I know. There was no anger in her voice. No hatred. Just peace. Michael looked at her with tears streaming down his face. I destroyed everything. Elizabeth shook her head. No. You destroyed your chance to watch your daughter grow. But you didn't destroy us. We survived. We healed. We built a beautiful life. Michael looked through the open doorway. He saw David helping Grace decorate cookies. Laughter filled the house. He smiled sadly. You really did. Elizabeth stepped closer. I spent years asking God why you left. I don't ask that question anymore. Do you know why? Michael shook his head. Because if you hadn't, I would never have discovered how strong Lily and I could become. Those words settled deep into Michael's heart. Not as an insult, but as truth. He looked at Lily. I don't want anything from you. I've already taken enough. I just wanted you both to know. Not a single day passed without regret. Elizabeth nodded. I believe you. Lily looked at her mother, then back at Michael. You once told me. She's my family now. She paused. I spent years wondering why I wasn't enough. Michael covered his face. I'm so sorry. But today, Lily continued, I finally understand. You weren't rejecting me. You were running from the responsibility of loving us. Michael broke down completely. I'm ashamed of the man I used to be. Lily walked toward him. For a second, Michael thought she might hug him. Instead, she gently placed the old family photograph back into his hands. You can't change yesterday, she said quietly, but you can decide who you'll be tomorrow. Michael looked confused. What do you mean? Lily smiled softly. Our family center helps children whose parents abandon them. We also counsel fathers who want to rebuild broken relationships. She looked him in the eyes. If your regret is real, don't spend the rest of your life talking about it. Help another child keep the father they still have. Michael stood speechless. She wasn't giving him his old life back. She was giving him something else. A purpose. A chance to make someone else's story different. Months passed. Michael became a volunteer at the center. Every Saturday, he sat with young fathers who were on the verge of walking away from their families. He never preached. He simply told them his story. He told them about the little girl who waited by the window every birthday. He told them about the teddy bear. He told them about the empty mansion. He told them about the day he realized success meant nothing if there was no one left to share it with. Many fathers changed their minds because of his testimony. Some went home that same day and hugged their children. Others apologized before it was too late. Michael couldn't rewrite his own past, but he could help protect someone else's future. One sunny afternoon, as he prepared to leave the center, a small voice called from behind him. Grandpa Michael. He turned around. Little Grace came running toward him with a handmade card. She wrapped her tiny arms around his waist. He knelt down slowly and hugged her tightly. Tears filled his eyes. Lily watched from a distance. She smiled. Trust hadn't returned overnight. Some wounds needed time. But every Saturday, Michael showed up. Not because anyone forced him to. Because he had finally learned that love isn't proved by promises. It's proved by presence. As the sun began to set, 3 generations sat together on a park bench outside the center. No one said very much. They didn't need to. Some moments are too meaningful for words. The narrator's voice faded in. Many people believe the greatest loss in life is money. Others believe it's power. But neither compares to losing the people who loved you because of the choices you made. Michael Carter spent 20 years chasing success while leaving his family behind. By the time he understood what truly mattered, he could never recover the years he had thrown away. He discovered that forgiveness is a gift. But consequences are life's greatest teacher. If the people who love you are still beside you today, don't wait until tomorrow to appreciate them. Because time never refunds the moments we waste. Treat your family with love. Choose them every day, and remember, every action has a consequence, and every choice writes the story of your future.